I'm Jessica Chobot. We're one step closer to the Godzilla cinematic universe, and this is Nerdist News. If you're anything like me, and if you're watching this show, I sincerely hope you are, then you hold giant monsters as something sacred above all things. Which means, like me, you probably flipped your lid when you found out that Godzilla and King Kong are headed for another big screen showdown.
Let them fight.
Yes, Legendary Pictures is moving its upcoming Kong Skull Island from Universal to Warner Brothers, which is where they made the 2014 Godzilla movie, so as to better set up an eventual Kong vs. Zilla Dawn of Justice. How's that gonna work? Well, we've got some ideas, but first, here's what we know so far. Skull Island will begin in 1970s Detroit and feature a team of explorers played by Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Sam Jackson, and Toby Kebbell as they head to the eponymous island and witness the origins of Kong. So it's a reboot and a prequel, except set after the timeline of the original flick. Right, Kong begins. Got it. I'm not really sure what I just said. Last year's Godzilla, of course, showed the great lizard, who's been around since prehistoric times, finally emerging as our great building-smashing savior in 2014. As of our last update on Zilla's next step, it seemed like he'd take on the franchise's three most popular villains, Mothra, Ghidorah, and Rodan, all at once for a battle royale in the sequel, once director Gareth Edwards wraps his work on Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. So what happens now? Well, it sounds like we're gonna see Kong, Skull Island in 2017, Godzilla Dos in 2018, and then finally a year or two later, the rematch we've all been waiting for since Kong forced Zilla to eat his veggies back in 1962. But here's a question. If Legendary's Godzilla is big enough to tower over most skyscrapers, and pretty much every iteration of King Kong has only been large enough to sit atop the Empire State Building, then wouldn't it take like a tower of King Kong sitting on top of each other's shoulders wearing a trench coat to even make eye contact with the king of monsters? Let's break down some possibilities. Option A. The Kong we met 40 years in the past in Skull Island is just a baby or a cool teen. By 2019, or whenever the mashup movie comes out, he'll have grown exponentially to be almost exactly the same height as Godzilla, forcing him to expand his habitat from the tiny Skull Island into the bigger world where he runs into G-Man. Option B. Kong is actually female in Skull Island, and at the end of the movie, she'll lay a whole bunch of King Kong eggs, which hatch into a team of little Kongs that form a giant King Kong Voltron to battle Godzilla. I didn't write that one. Option C. Legendary and Warner Brothers lean into the whole David versus Goliath thing, and the battle is more about Kong brains versus Zilla brawn, although I think Zilla is perfectly smart. No matter what option you pick, I'll put money on the fact that those explorers in Kong, Skull Island, are really members of the super secret Project Monarch that we saw in Gareth Edwards' Godzilla flick. You know, the scientists who had the cool job of studying kaiju for a living. And considering Max Borenstein is the screenwriter behind Godzilla and Skull Island, he was probably already laying the groundwork for this movie in last year's Gojira movie. But what do you guys think? How could a face-off work between the historically only pretty big King Kong and Legendary's tallest ever Godzilla? Who will you root for when the monsters finally face off? Let's discuss. Click on Godzilla to subscribe to Nerdist, and make sure you check out our Q&A with the top 10 authors in our Inkshares novel contest over at Nerdist.com. And you guys, this Monday is the big Fathom event for Nerdist Presents The Hive. It's our horror film, executive produced by Chris Hardwick and Steve Aoki. You've got to sign up quick before you miss it. It's so close, you guys. Seriously, it's so close. Find out all the info at Nerdist.com, which you should always be checking for even more Nerdist news. Are you just gonna keep on standing back there? Dude, don't you have work to do? Seriously.